Oh, yeah. Good morning. That is Uncle Lou here. Teams trending up for 2024, headed in the right direction. Now, I made myself a couple of qualifiers for this list here. I took anybody off who finished in the top 10 last year. Now, you could still be trending. You could finish in the top 10 last year and still be trending up, obviously. If you finished 10th last year, you could finish 8th next year. That's obviously still trending up. But I tried to find some teams that weren't maybe sort of obvious ones, right? And two that this sort of took off my list immediately, that a lot of people are talking about this offseason as having potential great seasons next year. Ole Miss and Missouri. Obviously, Ole Miss and Missouri are both trending up. Ole Miss won 11 games last year, I believe, for the first time in school history. Missouri, a 10-plus win season last year, New Year's 6 win over Ohio State. Clearly, both of those teams are trending up. But they both finished in the top 10. I think they finished 8th and 9th, respectively. So, again, it's not that I don't think those teams are going to do good or continue to trend up. That's not the point at all. But I tried to find some teams outside of the top 10 sort of headed in the right direction. And I got a list of 5 here. Now, this first one, first of all, this team never gets enough attention. People don't talk about this team enough ever. And particularly this offseason, I think they're going to sort of get forgotten about because of the year they had last year, and that's Utah. Utah's been one of the most consistently good football programs in the country over really the last 15 years. During that time period, they've transitioned from Group of 5 to Power 5. They spent a lot of time in the Pac-12 and, of course, now have moved into the Big 12 with the disintegration of the Pac-12. And they did have a down year last year. Now, there are some key reasons you could point to in terms of why that was, most notably the injury to quarterback Cam Rising, who actually got hurt at the end of the 2022 season and was never able to come back in 2023. The decision was made a little over halfway through the season to just hold him out for the entirety of the season. So he's back. That's obviously a huge benefit. And Kyle Whittingham is back. And how long has he been there now? 16 years? I don't know if I wrote it down. He's been there forever. And like I said, the model of consistency, Utah. I made some notes here. You know Uncle Lou does his copious notes here. But 8-4 last year, which again is not a terrible year, but they did finish unranked. They finished just outside the top 25, which is unusual for Utah lately under Kyle Whittingham. Finished regular season 8-4, 8-5 after a bowl loss to Northwestern. But Kyle Whittingham, of course, back at head coach. Cam Rising going to be back from injury. And they added a bunch of key additions through the portal. I mentioned they're moving from the Pac-12 to the Big 12. Scheduling is going to be something that I think it's going to take all of us a little bit of time to wrap our heads around for next season. We're sort of used to, well, not that schedules stayed totally the same from year to year in college football, but depending on the conference your team was in, you had sort of a set rotation of games that you were used to, and it just made it sort of easier to kind of familiarize yourself with the schedules. All that's out the window for 2024. All of the conferences are changed for next season. Right? The SEC added 2 teams. The Big 10 added 4 teams. The Big 12 added 4 teams. The ACC added 3 teams. The Pac-12 doesn't exist anymore. So all of the schedules are completely different. But if you look at Utah's schedule for next year, again, this is teams that are trending up. So with Utah specifically, they were 8-4 last year and they finished unranked. If they go 9-3 and finish ranked next season, that would be a trend in the right direction, right? But anyway, here's their schedule for next year, their Big 12 schedule. At Oklahoma State, that's going to be difficult. I think Oklahoma State is going to be one of the favorites in the Big 12. They do have to play on the road there. Arizona, another good team, moving from the Pac-12 to the Big 12. They did lose their coach to Washington, but at quarterback Noah Fatidia or whatever his name is, he's back. They've got some talent. They had a really good year last year. They get Arizona at home. They have to play on the road at Colorado, and then they get Iowa State at home. So if you sort of glance through their schedule, those are 4 of the games that kind of stick out. How many of those 4 games do you think they can win? On the road at Oklahoma State, home against Arizona, at Colorado, home against Iowa State. Can they split those? If they split those 4 games, they're probably looking at a 9-3 or better season, in my opinion. And if you look, like I said, they've been the consistency of or the model of a good program. 2023 was a down year at 8-4, but you go back to the year before that, 2022, a 10-win season. The year before that, 2021, a 10-win season. 2020 was the COVID year. They only played 5 games that year. 2019, an 11-win season. So other than last year, they had 3 straight 10-plus win seasons, and then, of course, that led to the 8-4 season last year. I think Utah trending up. I'd be shocked if they don't finish the season ranked in 2024. Next on the list, Notre Dame. Look, I've been hard on Notre Dame a lot on this channel when I felt like they've deserved it, and I still have some issues and thoughts about Notre Dame as it pertains to making the playoffs and what I feel like their record should be for them to even be considered to make the playoffs, given the fact that they continue to choose not to participate in the conference, therefore purposely avoiding a 13th game every single year. But that's a different video for a different day. They were not a terrible team last year. In fact, you can make the argument they were already trending in the right direction last year. Last year was Marcus Freeman's second year at Notre Dame. Year 1 was not great. Now, the record wasn't horrible, but they had those disastrous losses to Marshall and Stanford. Last season, they avoided that. Now, they had some losses. They finished 10-3, 10-2 in the regular season. I'm sorry, 9-3 in the regular season, 10-3 after just absolutely destroying Oregon State in the bowl game. But Marcus Freeman now moving into his 3rd year. They bring in the offensive coordinator from LSU. There's a lot of interesting shit. I don't know what else to say going on back and forth between LSU and Notre Dame. First of all, their fans absolutely hate each other because they continue to argue over Brian Kelly. And, you know, the Notre Dame fans laugh at LSU because they have Brian Kelly. LSU fans laugh at Notre Dame because they took Brian Kelly. In my opinion, it's yet to be determined really which one of those two teams has come out ahead in that Brian Kelly swap from Notre Dame to LSU. Obviously, LSU and Brian Kelly had a better year. The first year, Brian Kelly was at LSU and Marcus Freeman was at Notre Dame. But last year, I think Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame had a better year than LSU. So maybe this year will be the determining factor there on who won or lost the Brian Kelly sweepstakes. But this is his 3rd year. They bring the LSU offensive coordinator in. Riley Leonard, of course, transfers in from Duke. Is this going to be a pattern for Notre Dame now? One of the biggest knocks on Notre Dame, at least one of my biggest knocks on Notre Dame when it comes to their roster and their talent, their play on the field over the last, 10 years or so, really, with Brian Kelly. They had really good lines of scrimmage, had good defenses a lot of years, some good tight ends, good offensive linemen. Really where they've lacked has been the skill position players, right? Corner on defense somewhat, but primarily wide receiver and quarterback. They addressed that last year with Sam Hartman, and I think their wide receivers last year were probably the most talented I have seen on a Notre Dame roster in a long, long time, and they continue to make moves in the transfer portal to help beef that up. Sam Hartman was there last year. He's now gone, so they bring in Riley Leonard from Duke, who, of course, had an amazing year at Duke last year, really right up to the point where he got injured. He actually just had surgery on his ankle, too, I read last week, I guess it was, or it might have been the beginning of this past week. But he'll be back and fully ready to go by the time the season starts. No issues there. Riley Leonard takes over quarterback at Duke. They brought in 3 transfer wide receivers, all of which I think will play, and they return a ton on defense. And again, this is from a team that went 10-3 last year, finishing just outside the top 10 at 14. Let's take a look at their schedule. Of course, they're not really in the ACC, but they play a lot of ACC teams. But when you look at their schedule, they got a game early in the year on the road at Texas A&M. And I know Texas A&M has struggled the last couple of years. They've moved on from Jimbo Fisher, but I think they upgraded by going to Mike Elko. I think Texas A&M is probably going to be better going forward than what they've been the last 2 or 3 years under Brian Fisher. Is that going to be enough for them to beat Notre Dame early in the season? Probably not. Notre Dame, I would expect, would be a significant favorite, but they do have to travel to Texas A&M to play that game early in the year. Some of their other tougher games on the schedule, they get Louisville at home. I'm expecting somewhat of a drop-off from Louisville this year. I think last year was sort of like a TCU-type year for Louisville. Don't think they're going to be terrible. I like Braum as a coach, and the ACC is garbage. You don't have to be great in the ACC to have a really good record, but I don't think Louisville is going to be quite the team they were last year. They also get Florida State at home, Notre Dame does. So, again, not an easy game, but you get it at home, Louisville and Florida State. Toughest road game outside of that trip to Texas A&M early in the year probably comes later in the year at Southern Cal. Again, a team that, if I were to make the opposite of this video, maybe teams trending in the wrong direction, Southern Cal would be in that video. You would think Notre Dame would be able to go on the road and win at Southern Cal. So it looks like another 10-win season for Notre Dame to me. And the question is going to be, how many of these 4 games can they win? Texas A&M, Louisville, Florida State, and Southern Cal. And can they avoid a catastrophic loss? Because if they get to 11-1, They're definitely making the playoffs. 10-2, they're most likely making the playoffs. There may be some debate if they're 10-2, but if they're 11-1, they'll get in. But I've got Notre Dame on this list trending in the right direction. Up next, Oklahoma State. I've always liked Gundy as a coach, and for a while it looked like they kind of disappeared. They were pretty good a couple of years ago, and then around the midway point 2 seasons ago, 2022, they just nosedived. In 2022, they lost, I think, like 5 of their last 7 games or something like that, and then carried that into 2023. It did not start well. The first month of the season was not good for Oklahoma State. But they turned it on, particularly over the middle half of the season. Got the big win over Oklahoma. Mike Gundy's back for like his 100th year now. But anyway, do you realize they won 10 games last year? They did. They went 10-4. They were 9-3 in the they were 9-3 in the regular season. Then they lost the Big 12 championship game to Texas before beating Texas A&M in a bowl game to finish at 10-4. They were 16th in the final AP ranking. So again, trending up. I think they could do a little bit better than that in 2024. Gundy back for his 100th year, like I mentioned, as well as Heisman hopeful and one of the best returning running backs in the country, Ollie Gordon. Their quarterback and 2 of their best wide receivers from last year are also back. So, you know, Gundy's been known to put some lethal offenses on the field, and with the amount of talent and experience they have returning on the offensive side of the ball, I expect Oklahoma State to be really, really good offensively in 2024. I do have a lot of questions about them on the defensive side of the ball, though. They were not great last year on that side of the ball, and they don't appear to have done a whole lot to address that, either through recruiting or the transfer portal, at least not enough to make me convinced that the defense will be where it would need to be in order to, you know, be a potential playoff team. But nevertheless, I do think this is a team trending in the right direction. I expect a pretty good year for Oklahoma State. Again, the Pac-12 is completely reworked for 2024. The 2 sort of big powerhouses of that league are gone, Oklahoma and Texas. They're now in the SEC. That leaves a huge power vacuum in the Big 12. And I'm not sure that there is a team or even 2 or 3 teams that will be able to sort of permanently fill that vacuum. I think what we're about to see in the Big 12, at least over the next few years, is a rotating cast of top teams. I think you're going to have 2 or 3 teams a year in the Big 12 that are sort of vying to win the Big 12, which of course would equal a playoff berth, an automatic playoff berth for conference winners out of the Big 12. And then, you know, the following year, maybe a different set of 2 or 3 teams. In other words, I'm not sure there's a program right now in the Big 12. Maybe it's a Utah. You know, maybe Arizona keeps it going, although with a new head coach, there's plenty of question marks there. It's hard to find a program in the Big 12 right now that I can be confident in saying, okay, I think this particular team is going to have a really good shot at winning the Big 12 every year for the next 3 or 4 years. It's hard to pinpoint that team. It seems like sort of a wide open league. Why not Oklahoma State? I've got them trending up in 2024. Now, this next one's going to be a little controversial, and I get it. I've got Texas A&M on this list. I know they're terrible. They've been terrible. All they do is go 8-4, except when they don't, and then they go 7-5 or 6-6 or 5-7. I know. I think it's a massive upgrade to get Mike Elko. Not even necessarily because I think Mike Elko's a better overall coach than Jimbo Fisher. Maybe that can be debated. I think things had gotten so toxic and stale at Texas A&M with the debate and argument around Jimbo Fisher that almost any change would have been a change for the better. I think they need some new energy there, new juice, new blood, whatever you want to call it. I think this will energize the Texas A&M program. And let's not forget, the one thing Jimbo Fisher did manage to get right during his time at Texas A&M was the recruiting. Now, I know they've lost a ton of players to the portal. A lot of teams have. But they've done a really good job early on under Mike Elko and going out into the portal and sort of backfilling some of those losses. But they were 7-5 last year in the regular season, 7-6 after a bowl loss to Oklahoma State. But they bring in Mike Elko and 20 portal players with starting experience. So these aren't career backups they're bringing in. These aren't 3rd and 4th year guys who've been riding a bench somewhere and just looking to get out. They bring in 20 portal players with starting experience. Now, not all of that is SEC experience or even Power 5 experience, but 20 players with starting experience, and a large number of those players are going to end up starting this season, I think, at Texas A&M. Quarterback Connor Wegman is back. He looked good at times at Texas A&M under Jimbo Fisher. He's battled some injuries. He's back from the injury, or will be in 2024. He's expected to get to start at quarterback. But here's the thing, and again, just like with a lot of what you look at for 2024, you have got to look at these teams' schedules and then compare it to other teams' schedules in that same league, because schedules within a league right now can be so vastly different. You could have a team, let's say you rated every team 1 through 10, like 10 is a perfect team, 1 is the worst team imaginable, okay? You're going to have a lot of scenarios where a team who is, let's say, a 7 on that scale, so a pretty good team, right, is going to finish with a worse record than a team that's a 5 because of scheduling. And I'll give you an example here. Texas A&M does not play Georgia, Bama, Ole Miss, or Oklahoma. Now, depending on where you look, those are 4 of the top 6 teams in the SEC next year. Now, there's plenty of other good teams in the SEC, and Texas A&M plays some of those teams. We're going to talk about it in a minute. But again, they don't have to play Georgia. They don't have to play Bama. They don't have to play Ole Miss. A lot of people think those are the 3 best teams. Throw Texas in there. They do play Texas. We'll get to that in a minute. But they don't play Georgia, Bama, Ole Miss, or Oklahoma. So take that any way you want. Who do they play? Well, they play Notre Dame. We already talked about that when we talked about Notre Dame earlier in the video. They host Notre Dame very early in the year. Now, if they somehow pull that out, it would be a massive, I don't know if we could overestimate how big of a win that would be. First of all, it's going to be over likely a top 10 team in Notre Dame. I expect Notre Dame to be ranked in a lot of people's preseason top 10 heading into the season. And it's Mike Elko's first game, and it's at home. Those people are starved for a decent product in Texas A&M. They've got Notre Dame to start the season and Texas to end the season. If they were to sweep that, they'd probably build a Mike Elko statue. They could go 2-10. If they beat Notre Dame at the beginning of the season and Texas at the end, probably a Mike Elko statue going up. Now, I don't think they can beat both of those teams. They're more likely to lose both than they are to win both. But the point is, this is a huge early game for Texas A&M, a chance for Mike Elko to make a statement. I don't know if he can do it, but they play Notre Dame, and then you move into the SEC schedule, and you tell me who's beating them here. At Florida, I'll take Texas A&M right now in that one. Versus Arkansas on a neutral site. Sam Pittman hanging by a thread at Arkansas. KJ Jefferson gone. They could win that game. They could. Maybe you're not confident they will beat Florida. Maybe you're not confident they will beat Arkansas. Can you at least concede it's possible they could? You could see that happening. Let's assume they lose to Notre Dame. They could beat Florida. They could beat Arkansas. The next game's against Missouri. Probably a loss, but they get it at home. It's Missouri at home for Texas A&M. There are 2 non-con games, McNeese State and Bowling Green. Okay, so if you look at just the non-con, Notre Dame, McNeese State, Bowling Green, should go 2-1 there. And again, back to the SEC schedule. On the road at Florida, I think they can win that one. Neutral site versus Arkansas, I think they can win that one. And then Missouri. Okay, so maybe they lose to Notre Dame, and then out of Florida, Arkansas, and Missouri, maybe they lose one of those. They could be 4-2 going into a bye week. They come out of the bye week, they play on the road at Mississippi State. Probably the worst team in the SEC next year, I think. That's a likely win. Home against LSU. You know, Jaden Daniels gone, offensive coordinator gone, a couple of those wide receivers gone. Have they done enough to address the problems on their defensive side of the ball? I think LSU is probably a little bit better of a team than Texas A&M, but this isn't a game that I would be 100% confident Texas A&M would lose, and they get it at home. So maybe they pull off an upset there and beat LSU. On the road at South Carolina, definitely a winnable game. So maybe they lose one of those between Mississippi State, LSU, and South Carolina. They could be 6-3 at that point. Then they have their second bye week. They play New Mexico State, on the road at Auburn, and home against Texas. They can win 2 of those games, I think. They're probably going to lose to Texas, although rivalry game hasn't been played in 12 years. Emotions will be absolutely sky high in that game, regardless of what either team's record is. Maybe Texas is sitting on a loss or two at that point, and Texas A&M is in a position to potentially knock them out of the playoffs. We'll see. Texas will be a big favorite, I'm sure. But I can see Texas A&M going 8-4 in Mike Elko's first year. And if they do that, I think that would be a step in the right direction. I know that's going to be controversial because Texas A&M is, one of those teams that everybody just loves to hate. But I think they could surprise some people this year. And then last but not least, the Hokies of Virginia Tech out of the ACC. Now, we got to keep in mind the ACC is absolutely horrific. How bad is it? Well, Virginia Tech finished 5th in the ACC last year, okay? And they were not a great team. With that being said, 5th in the ACC, they were 6-6, 7-6 after a bowl win against Tulane, a Tulane team that had beat Southern Cal in a bowl game the year before. It started off rough for Virginia Tech last year. They got better as the season went along. In their last 9 games, they went 6-3. They found a quarterback. The coach seems to have found his footing there. And almost every single key contributor from last year's Virginia Tech team comes back in 2024. Whatever you think of Virginia Tech last year, you've got to think they're going to be a little bit better than that this coming year, just based on the fact that they get all of those pieces back, including that quarterback, Kyron Drones, or whatever his name is. He was really, really good down the stretch for them. Another reminder that the ACC is not any good. You don't have to be some kind of world-beating team to win 9 or 10 games in the ACC. And speaking of the ACC, let's take a look at their schedule, because, again, you're going to see that they avoid some of the big boys within the ACC. All right, here we go. Non-con games: at Vandy, home against Marshall, and on the road at Old Dominion. They need to win all 3 of those games. Now, I know Marshall's got a history of pulling off some upsets, and Old Dominion in particular makes a habit of beating teams from Virginia, namely Virginia and Virginia Tech. And then at Vandy, just not a good team at all. They should be 3-0. Virginia Tech should win. They should be favored, and they should win all 3 of those games, and they should be sitting at 3-0. Then you start looking at the conference schedule. Home against Rutgers. That's a winnable game. That's a winnable game, a game they should win. At Miami, 50-50. Miami is another team that almost put Miami on this list. I do think Miami is also trending in the right direction. These aren't the only 5 teams that I think are trending up, but you just can't do a video where you talk about 25 teams or something, but I easily could have put Miami on this list. I think they are trending in the right direction in 2024 as well. I think this is a huge game for both of these teams, Virginia Tech and Miami. Seems to me whichever team wins this game is sort of stamping their mark on the season. We are improving. We are heading in the right direction for sure, no questions about it. Whoever wins this game, I think, sets up pretty good for the remainder of the season. But on the road at Miami, and then on the road at Stanford. Not a good team, a team Virginia Tech should be able to beat. And then a bye week. Very conceivable that Virginia Tech could be 5-1. All right, let's say they lose the Miami game. They should beat Vandy, Marshall, and Old Dominion. They should beat Rutgers, and they should beat Stanford. Let's say they lose the Miami game. They should be, at worst, 5-1 heading into their first bye week. They come out of the bye week and they get Boston College at home, a team whose coach just quit last week to head off to the NFL. They follow that up with Georgia Tech at home. Again, Georgia Tech, Miami, Virginia Tech. Which of these sort of middle-of-the-road ACC teams is going to find a way to win these games as opposed to finding a way to lose them, right? Look at Miami last year. They find a way to lose to Georgia Tech. Which of these teams is going to find ways to win these games that really, look, if you want to be a serious contender in the ACC, you got to be beating the teams like Georgia Tech, right? We'll see if Virginia Tech can do that. But Boston College and Georgia Tech in back-to-back weeks at home, coming off of a bye week, both of those are winnable games. Then they go on the road and play Syracuse, another team with a brand new coaching staff. Then they come home and they play Clemson, one of their more difficult games on the schedule. Then they get their second bye week, but they could be 7-3, okay? Let's say they lose to Miami. Let's say they lose to Clemson and then just pick any other game. Now, I think they'll be favored in all of those other games, but let's just say they stumble up and lose one. They could be 7-3 at that point, 10 games into the season, their last bye week, and then they come out of that. They play on the road at Duke, a game that I think will be winnable. Mike Elko, gone to Texas A&M. Riley Leonard, the star quarterback from last year, gone to Notre Dame. Lots of rebuilding going on at Duke. A good coach they brought in Cristobal, but we'll see. but that's a winnable game, right, at Duke. And then the finale, regular season finale, they host in-state rival Virginia. And if you were to just compare Virginia and Virginia Tech right now, at least in my mind, Virginia Tech is a rung or two ahead of Virginia, so that also becomes a winnable game. It's very possible that Virginia Tech could be looking at a 9-3 season here, and that may be enough to get them into the ACC title game, in which case they're one win away from the playoffs. Now, I'm not ready to go out on that limb and actually predict Virginia Tech to make the 12-team playoff, but look, like I said, we all have to wrap our heads around these new schedules, the new playoff format. The winner of the ACC, regardless of what their record is getting into the 12-team playoff. As of right now, there are 6 guaranteed spots in the playoffs, the 6 highest ranked conference champions. Well, there's only 4 Power 5 teams anymore. So you got the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12, and then the ACC. And then you're going to get a couple of Group of 5 teams. So a 9-3 Virginia Tech that sneaks its way into the ACC title game to face whoever, you're one win away from a potential playoff berth if you're the Hokies. But anyway, those are 5 teams I think are heading in the right direction, trending up for 2024. Let me know what you think about these 5 teams, and what other teams do you think are heading in the right direction this college football season? Let me know in the comments down below. Have a good morning.